Good evening and a very warm welcome to your English news package with Radio and Television Tonga for the hour. Making headlines, His Majesty King Tupou VI officially opens the 98th Annual Conference of the Free Wesleyan Church yesterday. United States summit with Pacific leaders including Tonga's Prime Minister began yesterday in Washington, D.C. And the new manager of Tonga Police Domestic Violence Unit believes domestic violence is on the rise. We'll have these and more stories later on in the bulletin. Now with the stories in details. His Majesty King Tupou VI highlighted that adversity comes as an opportunity for Tongans to consider how their lives are going and to renew their covenant with God. This was part of his address to officially open the 98th Annual Conference of the Free Wesleyan Church at the Memorial Centenary Church, Nuku'alofa, yesterday. Mark Ake with more on that story.
His Majesty, during his address, reminded people to question the work they do and see whether it is the proper decision for their lives, families, churches, and the kingdom. His Majesty says it was only through love that Tongans survived the volcanic eruption and the tsunami earlier this year. The theme for this year's church conference is the promises and the covenant, in which His Majesty says is interconnected with the month's theme. However, he says the restrictions of COVID-19 was an opportunity for Tongans to reconsider their lives and renew their covenant with God. His Majesty also added, lifting of the border restrictions and state of emergency is an opportunity for many families in Tonga to get together and at the same time allows Tonga's youth to have some working opportunities overseas. He adds that churches understood how difficult it is for families to live separately, but most of the time no one helps families who are facing hardships. As such, he questioned the people, are they making the right decision, or are their families more burdened with the church? His Majesty says, the responsibility required today is to help people achieve and obtain sufficient knowledge so they can make wise decisions in facing challenges in life. Meanwhile, the chairman of the vote committee, Lord Tangi o Vaunukunuka, in response to His Majesty's address says, it is a blessing to the churches for the reminder by His Majesty it is what the country and the church really need today. During the program, His Majesty appointed the President and Secretary General of the Church for 2021 to 2022, Right Honorable Reverend Dr. Tevita Gloa and Reverend Alifuleti Atiola, who were chosen to continue on in their roles. Right Honorable Reverend Dr. Tevita Gloa on their behalf, acknowledged the trust the people had in again placing them in the roles which they vowed to do their best. Also attending yesterday's program was Her Majesty Queen Anaspau, Her Royal Highness Princess Pilolevu, and His Royal Highness Crown Prince Tupou Ulukalala, Crown Princess Sinaitakala, and the Speaker of Parliament Lord Faufanua, and many guests.
Maydeck continues anti-use energy survey in Tongatapu and the outer islands. The Department of Energy Maydeck is conducting an anti-use energy survey in Tongatapu, Vava'u Hapai, and Ewa, which began on the 28th of September and will run until the 12th of November. The survey aims to collect information about national energy consumption on a residential level and part of the commercial sectors as well. The survey is carried out by random sampling of households. The survey is conducted by the staff from the Department of Energy. Meanwhile, the potential source of renewable energy, including solar energy and wind energy, is around 14 to 16%, but the government is working closely with all energy companies to hit the target of 70% in 2025. The first ever United States summit with leaders from countries of the Pacific, including Tonga, is underway in Washington, D.C. The Honourable Prime Minister Hogama Meliku and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Honourable Fekita Maloa Utoikamanu, is representing Tonga in the U.S. Summit this year. 12 nations have sent their leaders, including Tonga, and 2, Nauru and Vanuatu, have sent representatives, while New Zealand, Australia, and the Pacific Islands Forum are there as observers. The meeting began with the leaders being hosted as the State Department by Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. During yesterday's lunch, the group was hosted by the U.S. Special Envoy for Climate, John Kerry, and they discussed the most pressing issue for Pacific countries. Illegal fishing was one of the key topics when they visited the Coast Guard. Today, the leaders meet various government agencies and business leaders to discuss how to improve economic and commercial links with the U.S. In the afternoon, President Biden and the Pacific leaders considered the strategic importance of the Pacific, climate change, pandemic response, economic recovery, and maritime security. The leaders then joined President Biden at the White House for dinner. However, the United States is preparing to commit to providing more aid to the Pacific. Honorable Prime Minister Ho'okavamiliku and Honorable Fekita Maloa Utoikamanu participated in the 77th session of the United Nations General Assembly, which was held in New York last week. The New Zealand government has announced an additional 3,000 places for the recognised seasonal employer scheme. Mark Age again with the details.
The additional 3,000 places is a 19% increase on the previous season and acknowledges the industry's current needs based on strong growth and lower number of working holiday makers on shore right now. New Zealand's Immigration Minister Michael Wood and Agriculture Minister Damien O'Connor on the 27th of this month said that New Zealand government continues to respond to global workforce shortages by announcing the largest increase in over a decade to the RSE, providing the 3,000 additional places. The new RSC cap will allow access to 19,000 workers annually from participating Pacific countries, providing workforce relief to the horticulture and wine sector. The government of New Zealand also worked closely with the horticulture and wine sectors to ensure they strike the right balance by incentivizing local employment, bringing in further additional workers, and also requiring working conditions to be improved. Agriculture exports earned a record $53 billion last year, and it's critical to the country's recovery that they have the workforce to continue maximizing production and earnings. This cap maintains pressure on RSC workers to continue recruiting New Zealanders where possible, improve pay and conditions for workers, and invest in automation. Over the last year, New Zealand has received over 30,499 working holiday applications, and numbers are continuing to rise. The new cap was settled on a tripartite basis for the first time ever, with both employer groups and unions at the table, enabling a discussion about the number of workers and how they can ensure good employment practices. In a statement, the New Zealand government said they are committed to working with industry and unions so they can continue to maximize benefits of the scheme for Pacific workers, local employers, and the Pacific neighbors.
And domestic violence is a pattern of behavior on the rise in Tongan communities. This is according to Inspector Cipriano Tapueluelu after he was appointed as the manager of the Tonga Police Domestic Violence Unit. Inspector Tapueluelu says that there is a behavior where an adult tries to maintain control of another using physical, verbal or emotional force, threats or intimidation, isolation from family and friends, humiliation, financial control, destruction of property and other tactics in the household. He says that children exposed to domestic violence learn to believe that domestic violence is normal and they themselves often grow up to be abusers or victims. The Domestic Violence Unit is committed to seriously addressing domestic violence because it has in the past led to death. In a statement, Tonga police know the negative effects of domestic violence has on the victim, the perpetrator, the children, the family, and our community, and the Tonga police are trying to decrease its recurrence before the worst happens. Tapueluelu, who has 30 years of experience in policing, was appointed to his new role on 13th of September by the Tonga Police Employment Committee. His policing career began in the traffic department and he was deployed to the Regional Assistance Mission to the Solomon Islands in 2004, the police mobile unit, and has been providing prosecution services at the Magistrates Court. Tonga Police encourages the public to contact the Domestic Violence Unit on 7401 647 or 922 for domestic violence criminal activities. And that concludes tonight's English news package. But before we part, here's one final look at tonight's top stories. His Majesty King Tupo VI officially opens the 98th Annual Conference of the Free Wesleyan Church yesterday. United States summit with Pacific leaders, including Tonga's Prime Minister, began yesterday in Washington, D.C., and the new manager of Tonga Police Domestic Violence Unit believes domestic violence is on the rise. And that's it for tonight. Thank you for your company. I'm Ali Sigubo. Have a blessed evening.